this one I thought was really important. Again, another organizing thing. I feel like we're turning into Labor Central here. Every Sunday night, we're talking about labor and worker rights and what's happening with workers. And by the way, speaking of workers, Revolutionary Blackout Network is going to be hosting the Activist and General Strike Summit in, I think it's October 26th and 27th. It's toward the end of October. I'm sure we're going to be involved in participating. They've sent over a preliminary list, and it is beyond impressive. They're going to be talking to organizers. They're going to be talking to striking workers. They're going to be talking to activists. They're going to be talking to people in the field. They're going to be talking to people in media. They're going to be, God, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. But this story is really interesting because what's going to happen here? Starbucks union campaign at a crossroads. And I wouldn't necessarily pay too much attention to this, except that this comes from Socialist Alternative, and it is a Kansas City Starbucks worker that's publishing this. So, Josh Crowell, and I really appreciate his writing here. Union busting is disgusting. In August, the Kansas City Starbucks bosses went on the offensive and shut down my location permanently. We've talked about this, citing safety and security concerns. This was union busting, pure and simple. And my coworkers and I launched 4 days of protests in response. Big companies have always relied on the tactic of closing stores, denying benefits, and forcing workers into intimidating one-on-one meetings to stop organizing in its tracks by confusing and demoralizing workers. They announced this in a meeting of workers minutes before shuttering the store. We didn't take this lying down, but immediately organized in a picket line. We knew we had to stand together to fight back. Many of my coworkers, the ones who weren't already directly involved with the organizing, were having this clarity for the first time, understanding that the only way to defend against these attacks was to organize with their fellow workers. Starbucks has shut down many locations across the country under the guise of safety and security, with over 40% of those stores being unionizing shops. Very disproportionate considering only 3% of stores are unionizing. Lead organizers have been fired, many still with no recourse. As we go into Starbucks' busiest and most profitable time of year, workers will continue to be stretched in, as Starbucks continues to escalate their anti-union campaign. Our union, Starbucks Workers United, must start organizing towards coordinated action at a scale not yet seen if we're going to have a fighting chance going into the fall. One of the things he's pointing out is that far fewer stores are filing for a union. So while informing my former customers about what really happened at my store and chatting with our workers at the protest, I spent time thinking about the lessons I've learned from my experience as a first-time organizer. My store is one of the first 25 Starbucks locations in the country to petition for a union. I've been involved with the Starbucks Workers United Union campaign since January of 2022, and I've worked for Starbucks for almost 4 years. And now with my store closed, tied election, which means no legal union recognition, and no recourse but to protest for my job, I've learned many lessons and have come to believe that there are many things our movement nationally should be doing differently. You know, we don't just complain. There's going to be solutions. Our union needs a major change in direction if it's going to go up against a ruthless corporation like Starbucks and win a union for all the nearly 400,000 workers at 9,000 stores. Although only 3% of stores have unionized now, there have already been countless examples of heroic and inspiring organizing done by workers as part of our movement, like we covered in Minnesota a couple weeks ago.
Minnesota.
However, we can't just point to this. We have to take stock of the defeats, the shortcomings, and challenges ahead as well. When other workers and I raise concerns, we're told by SBW United leaders that what we're doing is working, so we just need to stay the course. But when I look at the numbers of our campaign, I see that there's a real danger we're headed for defeats if we don't change the course soon. The number of stores that have filed for a union election has declined dramatically month to month from its peak of 70 in March. This was down to just under 40 in May, 14 in July, and only 8 in August. I found that most workers are not aware of these numbers, which is a problem. In order to have an honest discussion about our strategy going forward, we need to have an honest picture of where things currently stand. So here's the chart. September saw a slight uptick, but July, August, and September have all seen fewer than 20 filings. Again, it's good that we've seen any, because we had Buffalo in August, we had none last September and October, and then they started to trickle, and then by January you saw a wave of stores. But it started to ebb down, and hopefully it starts to flow upward. So, what are some of these lessons that Josh has learned as a first-time organizer? Again, I appreciate Josh. I would love to have him on and interview him and give him a platform and a forum to speak himself here if he wants one. When we first started the Union Drive in my store, we got together a wide layer of workers into an organizing committee. This included workers from different shifts and ages, different lengths of time with Starbucks, and different positions. The strength of that diversity led us quickly reaching 70% union authorization cards signed. Maintaining total secrecy from management and actively organizing on the shop floor in our off hours over the phone and in person supercharged this process. But while these movements were crucial to starting our organizing, when looking back, I can see where we started to falter. The advice that Workers United have been giving workers hasn't put us in the best position to build the kind of strong organizing committees that are necessary for fighting retaliation and winning real gains. They didn't tell us to start holding regular meetings where everyone could give democratic input, or encourage us to start forming concrete demands that can speak to workers and motivate them to get involved. Unfortunately, they didn't present a real plan for my store or for unionized stores nationally to actually win. Colin talks about this all the time. What's the plan? Starbucks Workers United's ongoing emphasis on getting Starbucks to sign the fair election principles as their main strategic focus, while the company's anti-union crusade remains unrelenting, frankly, just doesn't resonate with my coworkers. While my store was able to quickly get cards signed, we never transitioned into regularly scheduled worker meetings. This led to many workers being pro-union but lacking any real engagement with the drive. Without these meetings, we weren't able to draw more workers into the cause in an active way, and our organizing committee slowly dissolved into a committee only in title, not equipped with the level of activity required to keep workers organized. Having the right conversations matters. During the early days of the campaign, I believed all workers would understand how important this was in the same ways that I did. By using vague ideas of dignity and respect and a seat at the table, I brought in some of my coworkers, but many didn't see this as any different from what they already had at Starbucks, with its emphasis on partnership and being a progressive employer, which of course we know is just window dressing. The union-busting lies spread by corporate and our managers were taken at face value because workers didn't have a concrete idea of what the union could actually win for them. I've heard time and again leaders of Starbucks Workers United explicitly advise against having concrete demands. What? They say they don't want to make promises they can't keep, or that if we say exactly what we want, then Starbucks might give it to us and undercut the need for a union. But that's a big mistake.
Back up.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Just back up a slide. What else? How did they?
Go ahead.
Leaders of the SBU explicitly advise against having concrete
demands.
What?
Yep. Why? Because you don't want to make promises that you can't keep, or if they say exactly what they want, then Starbucks might just give it to them and say, well, what do you need a union for if we're just going to do this for you? Well, because we all organized once. Maybe there's other things we want too.
There's other stuff, right? It should be a constant thing.
Right. The lack of clear demands on part of the Starbucks Workers United left many of my coworkers who were on the fence about the union inclined to choose Starbucks' side, and Starbucks is never going to give up any major lasting gains without a fight.
Also, unions are not meant just for like getting more money. And you know what I mean? Like, this is just give me the things I want and then we're done. Like, no, there's ideals that need to be met by the union themselves.
Yes.
Like, they have to be for the worker. They have to protect the worker first and foremost. Like, everything should be about that. They're going to pay for legal team and legal support and, you know,
Health
like,
insurance, about health care and benefits
right.
and time off and
comp. Yeah.
Okay, so here's Josh saying if we had concrete demands, for example, of $25 an hour starting pay compared to a living wage, or the removal of hours requirements for health insurance instead of workplace democracy, I know workers would have been more inspired to fight by seeing the real changes a union could give them. The other argument against demands the national leadership of SBWU promotes is that we don't want to show our hand to Starbucks. This doesn't make sense, though. How are we going to get Starbucks to give us what we want and need if we don't tell them? There is no amount or combination of clever moral arguments that Starbucks Workers United leaders can make at the bargaining table that will convince Howard Schultz to pay and treat us better. SBWU's current strategy doesn't seem to grasp this. Even
also, your concrete demands should be way more than a whole loaf of bread.
You got to start. You have a negotiating starting point. Yes.
Right. You need to be the highball in the situation. Like, they had to be constantly trying to meet your demands, not like, you need room to negotiate. So,
well, again, they
ask for the moon.
Yeah. And accept somewhere in between. Down. Yep. And accept somewhere below.
Right.
Yep. I'm 100% with you, dude. I don't know.
Yep.
So again, even the New York Times
exceed the things right. Yeah.
Even the New York Times has reported on this. Back in June, they ran a story profiling Jazz Brizak, one of the founders of Starbucks Workers United, which shed some light on the way she and the others leading SBWU view the question of strategy. And this is tied, I believe, to SEIU. This is still major union organizing. So these are some of the statements.
Brizak sound like it sounds like something that Frank Zappa would name its kid. Jazz Brizak.
Right. So Mr. Schultz has long opposed unions at Starbucks, but Ms. Brizak, for one, believes that even business executives are persuadable. Really? She is even mused about using her Rhodes connections to make a personal appeal to Mr. Schultz, something that Mr. Bensinger has poo-pooed, but that other organizers believe she just may pull off. Give me a fucking break. Richard has been making fun of me for thinking of asking one of the Rhodes people to broker a meeting with Howard Schultz, Ms. Brizak said in February. I'm sure if you met Howard Schultz, he'd be like, she's so nice, responded Ms. Moore. Her coworker he'd be like, I get it. I want to be in a union with you too. Really? Really?
We're fucked.
I, for one, don't think that business executives are persuadable by anything other than the sheer power of workers threatening their profits. Yes. In our store, lacking these crucial demands for workers to identify with and never solidifying regular meetings, workers went through the union drive passively. What I know is when workers come together and show their power through collective actions, their belief in that power increases. They further lean into struggle. Without workers taking ownership in the union drive and seeing the role of escalating action in getting the wins they need, workers will end up on the crushing end of an offensive corporate attack. Workers must show the bosses that they not only know their power, but aren't afraid to wield it. My store chose to wield our power too late. Workers of all levels need the space to participate. Many of my coworkers were far too busy to engage in being a member of the organizing committee. Why? Students have homework and classes, and many of us have second jobs to afford our bills. Without regular meetings, my store never developed opportunities for workers to participate, even if that participation is only a 5-minute vote on deciding what demands we have for a petition to march on the boss. Maybe a worker who couldn't make a weekly organizing meeting would have been able to make an organizing meeting, would have been able to make a monthly citywide Starbucks worker meeting. right? Being proactive and setting up opportunities for more people to have real ownership and democracy in their union is crucial to keep workers engaged. Guys, this is not something we can sit back and passively allow to happen. And I think a lot of the workers just want a union to happen, but they don't realize that they actually have to participate and be engaged and be involved. And that's what Josh is talking about here, that we need to strike together and democratically discuss strategy. As a national campaign needs a national strategy. Starbucks is a multinational corporation with an extensive and so far effective plan on how to deal with the union at large. Thank you. For workers to have a chance to win against the bosses, we must also have an effective nationwide strategy for organizing. Make sense? This is why I, along with a group of other Starbucks workers from across the country who have similar concerns, helped launch a petition calling for a national strategy assembly, where all workers can debate and discuss best strategies for how we can escalate against these attacks. These sorts of meetings should be ongoing and take up all questions of tactics, strategy, and demands for the struggle, allowing Starbucks Workers United to become truly democratic and worker-led. But at this point, the time for discussion is running out. SBWU leadership should organize a one-day national strike, and out of that, we should hold the National Strategy Assembly. The strongest weapon we have as workers is our ability to stop working and stop generating profits for the company. The bosses at Starbucks have 9,000 stores they profit off of daily, and shutting down one store for a few days or even indefinitely will not affect their bottom line. But hundreds of stores going on strike at the same time would. It would inflict much more damage to profits and catapult the struggle into the national media spotlight, garnering even broader public support. Maybe. As Starbucks continues to close stores like mine and fire worker organizers, Starbucks Workers United should throw its full force at the bosses through coordinated and escalating strike action, beginning with a one-day national strike backed up by a strong strike fund that's democratically controlled and administered by workers ourselves. It's no surprise at all that far fewer stores are unionizing when workers don't feel confident that their job will be fought for effectively by the union if they're retaliated against. Starbucks union struggle is not going away anytime soon and is spreading to other retail service jobs across the country like Chipotle, Trader Joe's, and others. Our hope is that organizing workers everywhere, but especially Starbucks workers looking to fight for a strong Starbucks Workers United, learn the lessons he has, and help make the strategic decisions necessary so we can reverse course, pick back up the rate of stores filing for elections, win a strong Starbucks union, and continue to rebuild a strong fighting labor movement in this country. Hell yeah, Josh. Thank you. That's badass. That's good stuff.
That whole thing about the demands is dumb.
Yes, it is.
What?
And that's one of the things that I thought we should really showcase there is that Starbucks Workers United is not making specific demands.
That
I
they
think
don't want to, that they think it's a bad idea.
Well,
not just that they aren't, but like.
Well, I think they are, but they're doing it specifically by location and not saying that we want a $25 an hour minimum wage raise across the board. But what do you think that would mean to every other worker if the union got that and they weren't members of it? Holy shit. Do you think they'd run to join it? A guy, what? How do you not see this? Yeah. Matt Luttrell.
But it's also like,
welcome.
You should always be having this is my thing about the communication from the unions are the problem, mainly.
Or lack thereof.
Right? Mainly. With their not with us, not with the outside, but like with the workers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the internal communication
like there's no
structure.
way you guys need to be putting out. You should have social media teams everywhere, like, just to be able to like work WhatsApp groups and, Discords, and like you need to be able to like get people communicating as much as possible.
Alert people when shit happens immediately and get them moving.
they should be already knowing the next thing when you make a demand. That should not be that hard.
Look, this is also one of the things that Colin, that the Bank sisters, that Lucy, that all of us have been talking about, is as we do these collective actions, as we do these live streams where we do these marathon, what do you call it? Roundtables, and we do summits. What's then?
Yeah.
What's next? Where do we take this? I think RBN is doing the damn thing like what Rome is doing. I think Misty is showing what's next in how we're going out and organizing and protesting. I think there were several.
That woman is a saint.
Whew, man, shout out to Misty. Love you, girl. And Delilah Barrios, even, contest. Somebody actually has to run opposed to the corporate duopoly and show that there is an alternative out there. The other thing that bothered me about this article is this pie in the sky belief that, of the union organizer, that she can potentially get Howard Schultz in a room and convince him that he should join a union with this person or with all these organizers.
Like that matters.
Well, first of all, it does. If he is an employee of the company, he's a member of the union. He should want to be a member of the union and support all the people that work for the union, theoretically. Except that we all know that that's ridiculous. And like it matters is right. By the way, human being, thank you so much. We got a $20 tip on the Rockfin. You can go over to rockfin.com/IND left news. And we are streaming live over there, and we are monetized over there. So you can give us a tip if you want to give us some weed money to Reef. I'll hook him up.
I feel like even then, like even with Delilah and stuff, like it's almost like your energy can be like appreciated more elsewhere.
The problem is the media structure. Again, their media structure is going to spin this. And that's even if you have a mass one-day strike so that they can organize and figure out what their demands are. What's the corporate media going to report on that? Are they going to report that that's how it was? No, of course not. They're not. They're going to spin it how they want to spin it.
Expect them to make the worst possible conclusions when you make any of these decisions.
Right. And that's what the majority of people are. It's all the majority of people are going to hear. Again, which is why you said they need to have the unions, and the mass labor movement in general needs to have a much larger organizing structure, including a mass media arm that is part of a labor movement and labor first. We are part of that media structure, even though we never really volunteered for it. We find that we are one of the few outlets that is regularly reporting on labor.
Right. Well, labor is similar to politics in the problem that, like, a lot of, power is corrupt in that regard. Like,
and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah. Well, even with all this, there's the possibility that union could not be working for you. Like, especially with infiltrate, like, you have to be vigilant in this, like, if you do support it. So, like, looking at these things and learning that, the Starbucks union doesn't think that we should have concrete demands. No, you should have that and then some. You should be making a big long list.
Yep. And checking it twice, according to Santa Claus. Anyway.
Yes, Santa Claus.
Santa Claus.
Yes.